How's your debating skills, people?
I've never been in a debate.
Oh, they're going to be fantastic.
So we're slightly intimidated.
I'm terrified.
Studies show that students now will have jobs in the future that don't even exist yet. So how are students expected to be able to be prepared for this working world?
As architects, we have the opportunities to create places that positively impact on learning and facilitate a sense of community, a place where they feel like they belong.
Firstly, it is my pleasure on behalf of the New South Wales chapter of Learning Environments Australasia to welcome you here tonight. So for us, this event is actually a little bit of a wild card. We haven't run an event like this in New South Wales. Don't sort of criticise us, but we've actually ripped it off from Victoria. We're giving it a shot anyway. So this year, well actually before we get started, I should actually acknowledge the traditional owners of the land for their elders past, present and emerging. And today's conversation really around the relevance of schools and school settings today, is actually really pertinent. We're in an age of exponential change, and really we need to stop and question and rethink a lot of the traditional models in which we explore. So today we're going to have a bit of a debate. I won't go through the intros, I'll leave that up for our MC, but we've got students, we've got architects and educators to have a bit of a reflection from all sorts of perspectives. And I'll be like an old school lecturer and just stand behind and tap. Please have a think about joining us. Become a member with Learning Environments. We're a community of architects, educators, facility planners and the like. Our goal is basically to help shape and form a community that helps really the next generation. So join us. Before we really get started, I'd just like to thank the University of Sydney for allowing us to basically invade their space. And thank you very much, Michael, for organising that. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our talented MC, Anne Nock, from Culture Learning Design. She's a talented educator in her own right. And over to her, she talks less than me.
I'll have that one. I'm already mic'd.
Oh, there you are.
I can just speak and it comes out. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. So we're going to, I'm going to set the scene first and then introduce the people. This is Sophie. This image always reminds me of the people that we serve. Whether we work in schools, we educate the educators, or we design schools. I always think about Sophie and her future. She's currently in Year 3. She'll start secondary school in a few years, and she's likely to complete the HSC in 2028. That is if we have an HSC in 2028. And possibly she's going to be in the workforce in the early 2030s. Who knows what the workforce is going to be like in the early 2030s? Demographers tell us that Sophie's going to have 5 careers, 17 jobs across her lifetime. Workforce analysts tell us that she will need to develop human-centred skills to be able to thrive in the years to come. That content knowledge isn't necessarily the greatest learning need that she has, but collaborating, displaying empathy. These things will far outweigh the need to memorise facts that are now so easily accessible. This debate asks, are school settings, as students currently experiencing them, still relevant in today's changing world? There is a range of descriptions that I'm sure we'll hear tonight that might explain the idea of how students currently experience them. But we know that the physical environment works best when it's responsive to cultural, social and learning contexts and able to adapt to change. Technology has shifted the game. If you were at our conference in Sydney last year, the LEA conference, you'll remember Doc Geordie spoke. And one of the things he said that I think hit all of us was this. He said, if you think technology is fast today, it's never going to be this slow. I know. So currently we live in this NAPLAN, HSC and ATAR worldview. Media this week around the NAPLAN results that came out centred on the decline in the Year 7 and 8 literacy skills, writing skills. Last year, the New South Wales Minister was then Rob Stokes, and he commented about that NAPLAN and encouraged teachers he said that the NAPLAN encouraged teachers to teach to the test, had fuelled edu businesses and was limited in its usefulness. So given that negative mania, years 7 and 9, doing their NAPLAN test, possibly they just didn't see the value in the process in the first place. But we still have NAPLAN, HSC and ATAR, but this might be disrupted. New skills, new pathways, new assessment criteria, moving from summative assessment to formative assessment to making, creating and prototyping. Does the design of the space impact the human activity? It was Winston Churchill who is attributed to saying, "We shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us." So shaping buildings that last requires well-informed and future-focused thinking. But don't they say that great learning can just happen under a tree? Haven't you heard that? So why do we think we need a physical structure at all? I know, WWFD. What would Finland do? How much of that context of that Nordic, and no, not Scandinavian, Nordic country is actually relevant to Australia? So I've posed lots of questions right now, but here's the last one. Are we just rolling the dice with Sophie's education and just hoping for the best? But guess what? I'm not here to answer any of those questions. Our talented debaters will no doubt answer these questions and many others that you might have. So I'd like to introduce you to the team right now. So Lily and Bridget, would you mind coming up here with me? We've got a couple of professionals in the room with us today. Maybe stand on one side. Yeah, a couple of professionals. You stand next to Mark. That way, a little bit more. That's perfect. Why have I said you're professionals?
Well, we are actually in the school environment every single day, and we experience
That's one reason.
learning.
The other is they're gun debaters, these guys. So this isn't your normal kind of debate, is it? Standing here doing presentations. This is the easy option, isn't it? What would you normally do? What's your debate normally look like?
So we get our debate topic just 1 hour before our debate, and then we have to come up with 3 to 4 different points in our team and also do rebuttals and engage with the other team. So it's not just standing up and presenting a pre-written speech, it's more on the spot and impromptu kind of style.
We couldn't have put these guys through that though, could we? Not at all. Why do you love debating?
Well, I think it's really good to be able to have the capacity to see different views. So you're put on a different side, you're either affirmative or negative, and the ability to see the different perspectives, and you might be forced to be on the side of a debate that you might not necessarily agree with, but you have to think you have to be able to bring the capacity to think differently, which I really enjoy, being able to explore other perspectives.
And what about this topic? Had you given thought to this topic before? Is this something you've debated or is it new?
I haven't actually discussed this or debated it too much.
How do you find out what to put in a debate?
Well, so personally, I went to a Steiner primary school. I'm not sure if you guys are all education gurus, so you might have heard of it before. Yeah. It's essentially a different method of teaching students. It's more learning through learning through application and learning in a different kind of philosophy, learning through creativity and allowing the imagination to fully develop, learning to think in different ways. So it's a different philosophy. So I've been exposed to different forms of education. Obviously, Monty's a bit more structured learning. It's a lot more focused towards the academics, etc. So that's how I've kind of been exposed to it.
I think everybody in the room is wondering, how did that Steiner sort of background, how did you enhance your learning? What did it bring to it?
So for me, being in a primary school that's Steiner education, I feel it gave me the ability to develop my imagination fully, which has really helped me into my senior studies because I have the ability to think in maybe a different way, in thinking a little bit outside the box, which is something that isn't fully acknowledged in tests and stuff, but I feel like it's a skill that is really important in the real world, and as I get older I feel like it's going to really assist me in my career and my ability to think differently, which is going to be beneficial.
Perfect. Thank you so much. They're awesome. Thank you very much. So, and Craig, you're going to share a mic. Here's the hilarious thing. The only people on the team in black are architects. How about that? So how's your debating skills, people? When was the last time you debated?
At high school.
At high school?
I've never been in a debate.
Oh, so they're going to be fantastic.
So we're slightly intimidated by these two.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to your comfort zone now. What is it that you love about designing schools?
You want to go first?
I think it's the privilege to create something out of nothing. You know, you go somewhere and then people give you all this information and you just create something on their crazy ideas. It's amazing. It's a real privilege, and I love working with people.
Great. Joe?
I also love working with people, and I think that architects have a wonderful opportunity to create spaces that can inspire learning. So that's my main driver.
Well, thank you very much, and good luck. Thank you. And Unity and Michael, bit of an introduction to both Unity and Michael. Unity is the principal of Anzac Park Public School. This is a new school that opened in 2016, designed for over 1,000 students. At the moment, you've got about 640. And it's considered within the department as one of the first of the new builds that was first in which the architects were able to reconsider school design. And Michael is an internationally recognised educational leader. He's taught and researched and published in education and transformation for over 20 years with 14 books and 55 book chapters and journal articles. His international research and practice focus on the 4 C's, which you need to tell us what they are, using coherent frameworks to make learning meet the needs of 21st century learners. Michael and Unity, this current education context, joy and excitement or fear and trepidation or a little of both?
Excitement. Absolutely.
I'm terrified. Terrified what if I'm about to offend every architect in the room. I'm on the negative side, so I'm looking forward to that. Every planning and design disaster, it's all on you guys, and you're going to be hearing about it. So I'm terrified of what they're going to do to me afterwards.
They're lovely people.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah. Don't upset an architect.
Any other thoughts about what's ahead of you now, Unity? You're good?
I did debate with a 6-year-old student this morning why they shouldn't be playing in the rain. So I feel like I'm ready to go tonight.
Fantastic. Well, you take a seat. You're the first cab off the rank. Now, of course, debates have rules and regulations. As you know from what Bridget and Lily said, this is not the typical proper debate, but we do have a timing limit for each of our debaters. Each person will have 5 minutes. There'll be a short bell at 4 minutes 30 seconds and one longer one to finish. And the timekeeping, as you can hear, is in Daniel's capable hands. So are we ready to get started? Are you ready, Unity?
I am.
Let's take this away.
Thank you, Anne. So are school settings as students currently experience them still relevant in today's changing world? Tonight, the affirmative side will argue that school settings are more relevant than ever. This will be argued from the perspective of an educator, an architect, and a student. You will hear from the negative side this evening, that schools haven't adapted to our changing world, that schools might be like factories. But as a teacher and a principal working in and with schools every day, this simply isn't the case. Anzac Park is a living example of how important the learning environment is for a student in the 21st century. Firstly, our learning environments enable our teachers to do great things. We know that it is the teacher that has the biggest impact on our students, and our learning environments provide our teachers with the opportunity to place learning at the centre. Our teachers actively learn alongside our students in creating opportunities for our students to learn both the cognitive and the non-cognitive skills required. We are setting our students up for a lifetime education, one in which they are comfortable with change, empathetic and self-aware. We are maintaining a robust focus on those literacy and numeracy skills and embedding the explicit skills teaching critical and creative thinking, problem solving, and those soft skills, collaboration, communication. Today, my students in Year 5 and 6 at Anzac Park, we're actively looking at how we can transform our school setting into an interactive light art installation, as in a few weeks they will open the doors to host their very own Vivid Festival. Our school setting is affording our students the opportunity to learn how to communicate, collaborate through the arts while embedding those core skills. Secondly, our learning environments afford our students the opportunity to learn how to learn and the learning behaviours required to be a successful lifelong learner. By utilising Thornburg's learning archetypes of caves, campfires and watering holes, our students are explicitly learning the learning behaviours required for these different modes of learning. Our students from 5 years old are able to articulate that a cave is a place where we go to reflect. It's a place where we go to learn on our own and internalise our knowledge. They understand how to collaborate in a watering hole and how to listen and work with their peers in a respectful way. They also understand how to actively listen and learn from an expert in a campfire. They recognise how to learn best and provided the autonomy to reflect on themselves as learners and select the spaces where they can learn best and the learning task is suited. Our learning spaces are vital places for our students to actively learn and engage. Finally, our learning environments are personalised. It's an old-fashioned notion to think that every child will be learning the same thing at the same time. The idea that schools continue to be based on a factory model doesn't reflect what I see each day. School settings enable learning to be personalised. In a Year 2 mathematics lesson last week, my teachers were using formative assessment strategies and all students were being grouped and supported at their learning needs. They were developing their understanding of mental strategies for addition and subtraction, and the teachers were able to differentiate and provide explicit instruction at the level of their understanding. It is our school settings that enable our teachers to utilise what we as experts know makes a difference in student learning outcomes. In 2018, we commenced the development of a tool for teachers to use what articulates best practice within a learning environment. We wanted to be able to provide our teaching team with a description of what best practice looks like. The framework is divided into 3 domains: how we learn, what we learn, and why we learn. Each of these domains is separated into 6 elements, and they have a 5-point scale that describes best practice. This is used as an observational tool so that we can reflect on each other's practice. The how we learn domain includes the elements of student-led learning, supportive learning environments, personalised learning, spatial affordances, how we can work collaboratively, and how we can learn through technology. Our framework actively utilises our learning environment to enable our teachers to reflect on their impact, which ultimately supports the development of the whole child. The question that we are being asked to consider this evening is, are our school settings, as our students currently experience them, still relevant in today's changing world? In my work each and every day, I am privileged to see firsthand how relevant school settings are for our students as we, as educators, respond to the changing world in which we live.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Trinity. Ready?
I'm ready.
Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. We are arguing that schools are no longer relevant, and that school settings, as students currently experience them, have lost their relevance in today's changing world. And I want to go further than that. I want to say that the schools we have are manifestly unworthy of our students and our teachers because of their design. And I want to take you to a place in southwest Sydney. This place in southwest Sydney I know quite well. I grew up in this place. And there is a jail, there is a primary school, and there is a high school. And nobody knows which is which. Nobody knows which is the jail, which is the primary school, and which is the high school. And in a world where we're supposed to be creating engagement and joy, that has to be a disaster of epic proportions. That has to be something that make us sit up and think about what we've done wrong with school design and what we can change. I don't doubt that Unity has a magnificent learning environment. In fact, she's got one of the best in New South Wales. And I'll go on to talk about, why we have the kind of deserving and undeserving poor in New South Wales. But we actually have a problem with the way we are designing schools. As part of my work in schools, I've got a network of 40 schools that I work in partnership with 4C Transformative Learning. So we work in long-term partnership in these schools. And we work on pedagogy and curriculum and school organisation. I want to take you to a school that we work in, which is in the Hunter region. This school was built in 1902. It has brick walls that are 3 feet thick. It has fireplaces. It has coal-burning stoves that haven't been removed. It has libraries full of books. And when the principal wants to change any of that, you can just imagine what happens. So she spends 90% of her time fighting the department to make her school relevant, to make her school a pedagogical space. And she's done that. She has carved out great, huge chunks of wall so her classrooms are open. They can be collaborative spaces. They can create curiosity. They can build teamwork. They can generate influence. By the way, this is the learning disposition wheel that we use in our schools. It comes from research from 2012 from the National Academy in the US, which did a meta-analysis of the kinds of learning capacities. Unity's already mentioned some of them that are going to be required. I think our starting point is, how do we make our schools ready for these kinds of capacities? How do we make our schools not rows of desks like we see before you today? This building was built 2 years ago, and as you can see it's sage on the stage and everybody listening quietly to whatever wisdom I'm going to impart. So we have this endemic problem that we have in our heads. Our designers and to some extent our educators are still building kind of cognitively isolated places where you sit down, you do your work, you don't collaborate, you don't communicate, you don't critically reflect. So how might we change that? How might we kind of respond? How might we get over the kind of brutalist architecture we've seen? I know there's brutalist architecture fans here tonight, but how might we get over that to create joyous places where students want to go that don't feel like jails? How do we get over the narrow hallways that we find in many of the schools that we visit every day of the week? How do we get over the spaces that have the desks bolted to the ground? How do we get over the kind of narrow design parameters that we find all round? And the other thing another place that I went to, Fort Street High School, many of you may know it. The drama room, and you might imagine the drama room is a big space, it has a step in the middle of it. So kids doing drama, which means a little bit of movement, spend half their time on their face while they trip over this step. So these designs are actually kind of aggressive. And I take Unity's point that there are some great learning spaces, but the government is building 5%, building in 5% of the 2,200 schools that we have. We don't need to build in 5%, we need to build in 100%. We need to reimagine schools in the way that we're reimagining learning so that we can have amazing schools that allow amazing learning. And the extent to which we do that will be the mark of us as a society, because education isn't only about our young people, it's about how we build democracy and understanding. Last quote from de Botton. He says, "Buildings speak and on topics which can readily be discerned. They speak of democracy or aristocracy, openness or arrogance, welcome or threat, a sympathy for the future or a hankering for the past." I hope, like de Botton is saying, that our schools speak of joy, they speak of collaboration, they speak of creativity, they speak of enthusiasm. And our challenge, I think, is to make that happen, and I don't think we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Jo, it's over to you.
Right. Okay. So I'm wearing two hats for this debate today. The first hat is as a parent of two primary school age children, and the second hat is as an architect who designs learning spaces. These two children behind me are my children, Luca and Zoe. So in 2030, Zoe will be in her final year of high school, and Luca will be 3 years out of high school. So we can safely say that these guys are the generation of students that we're all talking about today. So my interpretation of the question is, are school settings still relevant in terms of being a physical space for students to come together and learn the skills they need to thrive in this changing world? With my parents' hat, I say a resounding yes, and I believe that they're more relevant now than ever before because they provide community and connectedness through face-to-face interactions. With my architect's hat, my answer is still yes, but I do agree with Michael that we can do better in creating inspiring and memorable places for students to learn so that they're motivated to go to school, that they're motivated to learn when they get there, and they're motivated to learn all through their life. So what's the big idea? What is going to make Gen Z spring out of bed in the morning and want to go to school instead of burrowing deep into their sheets and saying they don't want to go to school, which is what my children did this morning. And what can we do to make sure that once they get to school, they're engaged in relevant learning that will prepare them for future life? So as a parent, I want the school to look after them. And as an architect, I want to inspire them. So I believe the answer is twofold: creating a school setting with a strong sense of community and opportunities to connect, and creating a school setting that inspires students through creating a unique sense of place and identity for the school, a place where they feel like they belong. So let's go back a step and look at the problem. Richard Riley said, we're currently preparing students for jobs that don't yet exist in order to solve problems that we don't know are problems yet, using technologies that haven't even been invented yet. So what skills do students need to learn to be able to thrive in this uncertain future? Earlier this year, the AIS New South Wales commissioned a study called CEO Perspectives. And in this study, they asked a whole bunch of business leaders what skills they thought that students needed in the workplace. And they said things like adaptability, lifelong learning, collaboration, communication, all of the things that you've referred to. And I agree with all of those. As an architect, I use all of those skills in my daily working life. And as a parent, I agree too, but I think that more importantly, we need to create a sense of community and connectedness, and that's just as important as all these other skills. And especially it's important given this current social isolation, depression, anxiety that society is experiencing at the moment. So as architects, we have the opportunities to create places that positively impact on learning and facilitate a sense of community. Michael Fullan, in his deep learning framework, recognises that one of the 4 key elements required for deep learning is the physical environment. He talks about the modern learning space as being a combination of both physical and virtual space, and acknowledges that space can be the third teacher, which is also one of the principles of Reggio Emilia. But let's develop the idea of space into one of place. The relationship of place to belonging has been studied for centuries, first by Aristotle and then by the Romans, who talked about genus loci, or the spirit of place. In the 80s, an environmental psychologist called Prohansky introduced the concept of place identity, which in essence suggested through people having a personal attachment to places, a person can acquire a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose, which can give meaning to their life. So in summary, I believe that school settings are still very relevant in terms of being a physical place for learning and preparing students for later life. Schools create places for people to come together as a community and connect face to face, which has a high degree of relevance in this digital age. The skills our students need will continue to change. So instead of focusing on the acquisition of skills that they need, let's focus on them leaving school with a community of friendships and a love for learning and some really beautiful positive memories of their learning. In the words of Maya Angelou, people may not remember what you said to them, but they'll always remember the way that you made them feel. So wearing my 2 hats today, I say, let's create memorable places that inspire our students to have a lifelong love of learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jo. Craig, over to you.
Thank you very much. You know, there was a time when there wasn't a thing called students. There were just people, young people in society, and they became carpenters and seamstresses and shopkeepers within their community. That's how they lived. And then there was the Industrial Revolution, okay? The mass migration to the city, and they went to places like this. And what happened was you had a capitalist factory owner who was all about production and efficiencies and yields and profits. And what they did was they put a warden down the front. Oh, did I say warden? I mean teacher. They put a teacher down the front to train all the factory workers on how to be better at their job. So they're putting things together, and it's all about efficiencies. And then, you know, the government was excited by this, and they said, wow, we're going to pass an act that makes it mandatory to attend these classes. And then, you know, if you didn't, you went to jail, basically. So that was the birth of school. This is school. And it produces lots of kids, you know, factories over there, factories over here. And then, you know, without sort of blinking an eye too much, a couple of 100 years goes by. Hey, where did that go? And it's on steroids, folks. Have my school back, please. Sorry. And, you know, it's a funny thing you mentioned that it was institutional, because the principals of schools came to us architects and said, can you fix our schools? They're institutional. And we went, well, they are institutional. And they went, woo! We went, is that some sort of breath? And they went, woo! Oh, you want it to look differently but be institutional. So not look institutional. So we came up with some ways to make it look something else. There's some composite panel there. Lots of alucobond. We never did that, by the way. And we stuck a big-ass fan in the school hall. And then, as architects, we learnt to say pedagogy or unique pedagogy. You know, if you can say that as many times as you can, the work just piles in the office. You open the door and they fall in. Right, so, folks, it's the same thing. It's about production of kids. It's not about what we need in the workplace. You know, it's a myth. It's a factory. It was born of a factory and it's still a factory. What we want are critical thinkers, communicators, collaborators, people with empathy. What do schools give them? We take them away from society. We isolate them. Then we say, you're a boy, you're a girl, you go this way in some schools. And then we do things like we want them to be integrated into their community. So what do? Sorry, I've already said that. We take them away. Socialise. We want them to be well socialised. So what do? We ban social media. Seriously? That's how they talk. Then we want them to have imagination. So the conversation at school is rote learning, ranking, and ATAR. ATAR sounds cute, doesn't it? ATAR. You try saying ATAR to a kid that's doing the HSC, they'll punch you in the face. ATAR is not cute. Child minding? A school's child minding? Vicky, do you mind if I work between the hours of 9 to 3? No, it's not going to happen. It doesn't work. It doesn't do it. So there's two parts of history that we'll look back on here. There's the factory-based education and there's the denial that that happened. We need to move forward with new ideas. Thank you. Sorry about the mess.
We'll clean up the mess later, Craig. That's fine. Yeah, there's tissues all over the floor here. Awesome. Thank you. Oh, man. Lily, are you ready? Where's the microphone for Lily? There it is. Take it away. Oh, yes, you can move the school of the future.
The education system should be designed to equip students for a future filled with learning and adaptability. The education system's purpose is to give students the skills they need to succeed in this new world and assist us to grow in confidence and practice our skills. This purpose can be further fulfilled in the current architecture and layouts in classrooms. The issue doesn't lie in the design of a learning space, rather the relevance of the content and the skills we learn and how we are taught them. The systems are failing to fully engage students and prepare us for a changing workplace. This is the issue that is at the heart of discussion amongst my peers. The discussion is centred around the relevance of the content we are learning and how it can really be applied to the real world. There is a genuine desire to learn things that can be applied to the real world rather than for a test. It's evident that the syllabus is not effectively engaging nor preparing us for the changing workplace. There is a rapidly declining participation in science and maths in senior years, which are skills necessary for 75% of new jobs. My idea is that rather than changing the architectural design of learning spaces, we first need to change the actual content being taught in schools. Although efforts have been made to update the national syllabus in recent years, further movement in this direction is needed to adequately prepare students for a future and ensure that they remain engaged with the content. The style of teaching could improve to include more tasks and require different skills such as collaboration. The content should be suited to the changing world and workforce and readily equip students for a world full of innovation and change. By placing more focus on teaching us how to learn and understand new ideas and teaching us skills that are applicable to our changing world. This should foster a love of learning and an eagerness to continue learning, as we need to be prepared for a lifetime of learning as our society is progressing at such a rapid rate where innovation is prevalent and continuous learning and adaptability is essential to match the rapid advancements in technology. Students should be adaptable and capable of combating new and unpredictable challenges. As a student, I am accustomed to the classroom infrastructure. Typically, we change classrooms depending on the subject. The classrooms are adapted to suit the subject that we are being taught in the room. For example, a science classroom has lab benches and separated desks to accommodate group discussions and practical investigations. This setup for a science classroom promotes collaboration and discussion. In a regular classroom for subjects such as history or commerce, we have desk positions in two U-shapes. There is an inner U-shape and a larger U-shape around it. This classroom design is a safe learning environment where all students are able to see the teacher and the board and actively learn under the guidance of the teacher in an easily controlled environment. This classroom design allows room for the teacher to move around at the front of the room in order to effectively engage students through various activities. Group activities can also be conducted in this space at the front of the room. I like this setup as in a classroom I'm always able to see the board and the information being presented. I also think that this classroom environment is the best way to minimise students from being distracted and focus on the thing that is most important, learning. This establishes good habits for learning into the future and allows students to resist being distracted. The safety of students is protected in a formal learning environment. Risks are minimised as we are all seated and can be easily controlled, especially since one teacher has to control approximately 25 students. Currently, the infrastructure in classrooms is a safe and manageable learning environment that still allows for collaboration and innovation. I feel that by changing some of the content and the delivery of the information, we will better prepare students for a future of continuous learning. In conclusion, we must move beyond strictly following an outdated syllabus that is incapable of adequately preparing students for a future filled with innovation. By changing what students learn and the way they learn, to be accustomed to suit the changing world. We should be educating students to become adaptable to an unpredictable future, and classrooms are more than capable of facilitating this.
Thank you so much, Julie. True.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the topic so greatly states, our world is changing. We have new phone models, cars, medical discoveries, and prime ministers than we ever have before. Yet, as the image on the screen presents, our school settings have not changed since the Industrial Revolution, which was more than 100 years ago. It is thus imperative for students like myself of the future that schools are in that list of something that is constantly updating and changing with our world. So primarily, are school environments assisting students for the future? Studies show that students now will have jobs in the future that don't even exist yet. So how are students expected to be able to be prepared for this working world when we are still in this idea of the factory model of education? And yes, it does exist. This idea of rows, set instructions, minimal collaboration for 6 hours a day with short breaks. This idea fully transcends into factory work, which was great in the Industrial Revolution when factory work was a common job, but doesn't transcend at all to our current workforce when there's now only roughly 8% of jobs in factory work. The Affirmative team even argued that students don't learn the same thing and learning is for individual students. But as a student, I can assure you that we don't learn the same thing. So we instead need learning environments that stretch students' thinking, making them think creatively and critically, with a balance of individual and group activities suited to the actual student's thinking. Furthermore, do school environments properly help develop social skills? Now, I might even argue that the Industrial Revolution even had better education in some aspects than today because phones weren't invented. I'm sure both sides can mutually agree that communication and collaboration skills are vital for the future of work. But how can the Affirmative team possibly argue that schools now are great and relevant because they develop social and life skills when in actual fact they only develop social media skills? This is detrimental as we see an increasing number of businesses pushing for collaborative work. And for students today, it will be a struggle for them to integrate into the workforce when social skills have hardly been developed at schools. Finally, are school environments healthy environments for students? Students roughly go to school for 6 hours a day where their minds are constantly filled with overloads of information, most actually being irrelevant to the real world. And then on top of sport and co-curricular activities after school, students are expected to do hours of homework, which in senior years, which I can relate to, can get up to 4 to 5 hours a night. This unrealistic expectation that school sets births a competitive environment and not the healthy kind. One where students feel that they have to constantly get the best marks 24/7 to feel worth something in their school environment. And this idea is further exacerbated with only the top percentage of students being rewarded for academic ability. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be rewarded, but there needs to be emphasis on other things like arts or sports or even just overall improvement. And overall improvement is also critical as schools should not be about getting this top grade when they should be about gradually improving your knowledge and giving you skills that can actually set you up for the future. As my second speaker stated, there is also way too much focus on your final ATAR, thus putting unnecessary pressure on students. And this pressure is even unnecessary as many universities are now selecting students based upon co-curricular involvement, community service, and sport achievements. But what is the actual outcome of this? Because it's not like students are thriving in this environment. Mental health among adolescents is worse than it's ever been, with there being significant increases in depression and anxiety, a lot being triggered by school environments. In fact, mental health among young adults is worse today than 1950 mental asylums. And the further problem with this is that school settings often ignore that these mental health issues even exist, with more speakers coming to talk to students about study tips than mental well-being. It is from this that students will struggle transitioning into the changing world where there is a greater demand of work hours and more significant life decisions on the line. So after all that, what can we actually do to improve current school settings? And I am going to discuss Finland's school setting quickly, who are the number one in education in the world. Their students only go for 3 to 4 hours a day, they don't receive homework, they don't dismiss subjects like art and PE, they encourage group work in class, and there are no standardised tests. But I reiterate, they are the number one in education in the world. It proves that students perform better when they are given time to be kids. It proves that students want to come to school when school is enjoyable and have subjects that they actually want to participate and engage in. It thus proves that students don't reach their full potential when they are treated like simulated factory workers. Obviously, overnight, we can't change our schools to compare to Finland's, but we can rethink easily changeable aspects in the curriculum, like greater focus on well-being, removing content that doesn't relate to real-life aspects and real-life skills, and therefore have a larger focus on collaborative and creative learning. Because if we want a successful future where students are prepared for the changing world, we need to expand the minds of the people whose future it is. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, both of you, thank you. I mean, the other four, yeah. But you too, I don't think I could speak for everyone in the room here. We love having your voice in this discussion because your insight that you bring as you other people who are there is so valuable to us. So thank you for the time that you both put into that. It was really fantastic. So to sum this up, both Unity and Michael will have 5 minutes to bring this thing home. Take it away, Unity.
This evening, you have had the opportunity to hear from an educator, an architect, and a student about why our school settings, as we currently know them, are relevant. From an educator's perspective, I reflected on the affordances that our school setting provides our teachers in supporting our students to flourish in the 21st century. I spoke about how our teachers purposefully ensure that we provide opportunities for our students to learn not only the crucial hard skills, but also just as importantly, those soft skills. I reflected on how our learning spaces themselves are teachers of learning behaviours through the opportunities to learn and understand how we all learn best. From our architect, Joe, we heard about the importance of school spaces that are designed around our students' experience, about the importance of engagement, community, interaction and connection. From Lily, our wonderful student, we heard about the need to focus on applied learning. Lily reminds us about the importance for us to focus on adapting the content to match the changing world that we are living in. Our school setting is complex, dynamic, and constantly evolving. When I had a look at the ABC website this morning, Can a Robot Do My Job?, I found that it's currently estimated that 22% of a primary teacher's job can be automated. It tells us that the 78% that can't be automated is all around the relationships that we have. These tasks that are less susceptible to automation include assessing the educational needs of students, managing and supporting our students, as well as developing those instructional objectives. Ted Sizer speaks about the residuals of education. That is to say, what is left over after all the things that we practice and memorise are long forgotten? What stays with us long after we have left the classroom? As I look at my life today, the things that I value most, my curiosity, my love for learning, the value that I see in collaborating, all come from how I was parented and how I was taught. As a principal, I am truly optimistic about what it is that we have before us and the importance of the school setting. Schools of the 21st century are in the business of change as we work to develop and educate young minds. We expect that over time at our school, children will change, learn new things, and constantly reflect. As teachers, we are also constantly learning and adapting to new ways of working and are also constantly reflecting on our work. Our school settings are exciting places of innovation and change and will continue to be relevant as we voyage through the 21st century. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the arguments on either side. I just want to sum up by talking a bit, by summing up what we've been talking about through an analogy. And the analogy is of finite games and infinite games. It's a concept that Thomas Picarz, who was a religious studies professor, came up with in the mid-90s. And he talked about finite games being those games where we knew the rules. We knew who won and who lost. So soccer is a finite game. Naplan is a finite game. ATAR is a finite game. And we have infinite games. Games where winning or losing isn't the point, it's staying in the game. So education is an infinite game. Health is an infinite game. And I think what we've heard tonight is a classic discussion of the finite and the infinite game. The building of schools up till now, as we've heard, has conformed to that factory finite game where we just get enough kids in the space and feed them enough facts and they will be kind of made educated and they will be effective members of society. And yet what we're arguing is we need a new deal. We need a new model for the way we build, design and enable our students to learn in schools. We need educators and we need architects working side by side, not in their silos. We need mutual respect for each of the professions that is involved in school design, not the architects do their job over here and the educators do their job over here. We need schools that are about the things that this team talked about: collaboration, creativity, critical reflection, community. We need all of those things, but really are the frayed carpets and the sad materials that are just getting concrete cancer and disintegrating, are they really the places where that's going to happen? Are the rigid walls and the chairs that have chewing gum on them endlessly that I had to clean off once for doing something terrible, are they really going to do it? Are they really going to make this possible? So if we are going to break out of this finite game away from the industrial model, we need new designs. We need to do better than changing 5% of our schools. We need to do better than the silos we have lived in up till now. So if we are going to make these changes, we need to rethink what school is. We need to rethink what design is so that we don't let down the generation that is to come the same way that we have the generations that have gone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Can we just give a special thank you to the whole team right now? Thank you so much. So much insight, so many things to think about. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. Thank you to our debaters for provoking our thinking. And thank you for everybody else for just joining in that part and having that great dialogue. And I don't think this will be the last one of these that we do. So thank you so much, everybody.